All right, so picture this. It's 452. The sky over northern Italy is looking like a fresh bruise, dark, heavy, and mean. You're standing on the coast, and the air just reeks of burnt earth and wet ash. Behind you, the great Roman cities are being torn to shreds. You can hear that rhythmic thud-thud of the Hunnic cavalry coming closer. Attila is basically deleting the old world piece by piece, and everyone's losing their minds. You've got senators, master mason, and glassblowers all huddled together, looking at the only place left to run, the lagoon. To anyone watching from the shore, piling into fishing boats and heading into that gray, misty marsh looks like a suicide mission. But you see the logic. By hitting the water, these folks are air-gapping their survival. Those Hunnic horses are fast as the wind on solid ground, but they're dead weight in 3 feet of salt water and silt. The water is the ultimate firewall. You land on a patch of mud called Torcello, and the second you step off the boat, schloop, your boots just vanish into the muck. It's a total swamp. There's no stone, no solid earth, nothing but a thick, ancient clay called Coranto buried deep under layers of silt. This is where your sleeper brain kicks in with the first big engineering hack. You can't build a Roman city on a marsh, so you've got to reinvent how you touch the earth. You show these refugees how to take millions of sharpened oak and larch logs and drive them upside down into that deep clay. You're right there with them in the cold water, swinging the heavy mallets. You explain the raw chemistry. Because there's no oxygen down in that mud, the wood isn't going to rot. Instead, it's going to petrify. Over the centuries, it'll soak up minerals from the silt until those wooden stakes are as hard as iron bars. You're literally turning the lagoon floor into a massive, submerged forest that can hold up millions of tons of brick. Then you show him how to stack layers of Istrian limestone on top of those piles to make a dry platform. Sitting on a half-sunken log, you watch the first brick walls of a new civilization rise out of the muck. It's a city that defies the laws of gravity. That rhythmic thud-thud of the pile drivers, that's the new heartbeat of the lagoon. It's telling the world the Romans aren't dead. They've just moved underwater. The scale of the work is just insane. Every single building needs thousands of these wooden stakes. You're helping them calculate the load-bearing capacity of the clay, showing them that the deeper they drive those piles, the more weight they can shift onto the Earth's core. You're teaching them that the load-bearing pressure is equal to the force applied divided by the area of the pile's tip plus the friction along the sides. You even show them how to dig narrow little canals to manage the tides. You're using the water's own kinetic energy to flush out the waste and keep the whole network clean. You're teaching them that the water isn't the enemy, it's the resource. By the time the first generation is born there, the mainland is just a bad dream. You're the master of the fluid pulse, standing on marble steps that shouldn't even exist, knowing you've turned a muddy hideout into the most resilient fortress on the planet.
All right, jump ahead to 828. The Lagoon OS is ready for a massive branding upgrade. You're standing on the docks at Rialto and man, the air is just buzzing. Venice is growing fast, but it's still a small fish in a big pond, technically just a province of the big shots in the east. They need some real street cred to stand up to places like Rome or Constantinople. They decide they need a heavy-hitter patron saint, and not just anyone. They want Street Mark the Evangelist. Only problem? His body is sitting in a tomb all the way in Alexandria, Egypt. So you team up with these two merchants, Buono and Rustico. They're planning the biggest heist in history. You're in Alexandria, it's hot, and the tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. This is a classic social hack. You tell the guys, look, the guards aren't gonna check the bags if they're totally grossed out by what's inside. You help them pack the saint's body into a big wicker basket and bury it under layers and layers of salted pork. When you hit the docks, the customs guards take one look at that unclean meat, make a face, and wave you through without a second thought. It's perfect stealth encryption. When that ship finally hits the open sea, the sailors go nuts. Venice just downloaded its new identity. When you get back to the lagoon, everything changes. You aren't just Marsh people anymore. You're the city of St. Mark. You help them build the first big church, the central server for the Venetian soul. The winged lion becomes the logo, and soon enough, that brand is gonna scare the daylights out of every port from here to the Black Sea.
But a brand is just talk if you don't have the hardware to back it up. Fast forward to the 1100s. You're standing in front of the massive, fortified gates of the Venetian arsenal. This isn't just a place where they fix boats. It's a systemic revolution. You walk inside and see something that would break a normal medieval mind. The world's first modular assembly line. While everyone else in the world is building ships one by one, taking months and custom fitting every piece, the Venetians realize that to control the sea, they need to scale up and fast. You step in with your engineering brain to help the arsenalati, the elite workers, sync it all up. You show them how to standardize everything. You tell the foreman, listen, every mast, every single bench has to be built to the exact same specs. We need one source code. You set up a flow line along the canal. You watch a hull get towed to the yard, and at every stop, a specialized team plugs in a pre-made part. One team drops the mast in. The next snaps the benches into place. The next load the cannons, and the last team packs the wine and biscuits. You're teaching them about interchangeable parts 700 years before the rest of the world even hears the term. You tell the captains, if your rudder breaks near Crete, don't sweat it. You don't need a master craftsman. You just need a spare unit from the back of the boat. You even help him manage the supply chain, making sure the oak from the forest and the hemp for the ropes never run out. At its peak, this place is so efficient it can churn out a fully armed, ready-to-fight warship every single day. You tell them the logic is simple. The total production rate is equal to the number of stations in the line divided by the time spent at the slowest station. By making every station fast, you've made the whole city an industrial superpower. You're sitting there on a pile of rope, smelling the tar and salt, knowing you've turned the Venetian Navy into the ultimate global scaling solution. You've given a tiny city of merchants the hardware to tell kings what to do.
So get this. The sun is absolutely cooking the white sands of the Lido, and the air just reeks of unwashed wool and a bunch of desperate knights. You're standing there on the edge of the water, looking at the biggest fleet anyone's ever seen. Over 200 ships just sitting idle. The Crusaders finally showed up, but they've got a massive payment error. They promised a fortune for these boats, but their pockets are bone dry. That's when you find yourself standing next to a guy who's more machine than man, Enrico Dandolo. He's pushing 90, he's totally blind, but man, he can see market fluctuations better than anyone with two working eyes. He doesn't care about a religious mission. He sees a liquidity crisis he can turn into the biggest system hijack in history. You're watching him from the shadows of the palace, and he's playing these knights like a high-speed algorithm. He whispers, "Can't pay in gold? Fine. You'll pay in service." We're gonna run a diagnostic on our rivals. You hop on the flagship, and as the fleet pulls away, you realize the Holy Land isn't even on the map today. First stop, Zara, the rebel city that's been messing with Venetian trade. You help the engineers sync up the galleys so they hit the harbor chain at the exact same millisecond. The force of the impact is equal to the total mass of the ships times the square of their velocity, divided by the distance it takes to stop. Boom, the city's firewall just snaps. But Zara is just a warm-up. The real target is the big one, Constantinople. As you sail into the Bosphorus, you're looking at those legendary Theodosian walls. To the Crusaders, they're a miracle. To you, they're just code that needs to be cracked. You see the Byzantines laughing from the top of the walls, thinking they're untouchable because they're so high up. You pull the shipwrights aside and show Emeth's sleeper trick, the floating bridge. You have them lash long reinforced ladders to the masts of the tallest ships, all covered in raw hides so they don't catch fire. You tell them, we aren't going through the gates. We're uploading our soldiers directly to the top. When the signal drops, the fleet hits the walls. You're right there in the middle of it. The smell of Greek fire and salt spray is everywhere. You're watching Venetian sailors sprint across those swaying bridges 50 feet in the air. It's a total buffer overflow of the Byzantine defenses. The city falls and the Great Deletion begins. While the Crusaders are busy chasing gold and silk, you and Dandelo's elite teams are after the core data. You're in the hippodrome directing the guys to pull down the 4 bronze horses. You tell them, these aren't just statues. They're the user interface of an empire. We're taking the brand back home. You help organize the transfer of thousands of secret maps, ancient trade laws, and relics. By the time the smoke cleared, Venice had partitioned the whole empire, taking 3/8 of the territory for themselves. You turned a bad debt into a total market monopoly. You're sitting on the deck of a ship loaded with stolen marble, the hull tilting under the weight of history, knowing you just made the Venetian OS, the only superpower left on the map.
The bells are clanging overhead, but you're way below all that noise, tucked into a damp, stone-vaulted room right by the big bridge in a market district. The air is so thick with humidity, you could practically take a bite out of it, and the walls are sweating canal water. But inside, all you hear is a frantic scratching of quills. This is the back end of the whole world economy. Every single boat that pulls up at the docks is dropping off more than just pepper or cinnamon. They're dropping off input. You're sitting at a heavy oak desk, and these merchants are literally shaking. Their businesses have gotten way too big for their brains to handle. They've lost track of who owes what, which ship got wrecked near the islands, and where the actual gold is sitting. It's a total data crash. So, you pull a fresh sheet of parchment over and draw a line right down the middle. You tell the head of a massive spice firm, look, buddy, stop thinking in single lines. The system's got to be in balance. For every take on the left, there's got to be a give on the right. You're showing them double-entry bookkeeping, the world's first self-correcting algorithm. You explain that if those 2 columns don't match up at the end of the day, your data's corrupted. You're turning their messy piles of wealth into a logical matrix. It's basically a financial blockchain, just made of ink and paper. Then you pull the sleeper move, the partnership deal. You see these young sailors with no cash but tons of grit, and these old merchants with piles of gold but no legs to the sea. You show them how to bridge the gap. The old guy provides the hardware, the ship and the goods, and the young guy provides the execution, the actual voyage. Then they split the profits based on a contract. You're teaching them how to play it safe. 2. You tell them, don't put all your data on OneDrive, pal. Split your spice across 5 different ships. Back home in 2026, we call that portfolio optimization.
Next, you head over to the mint where they're pouring molten gold into molds. You pull the masters aside and tell them, the world is full of junk coins. You've got kings diluting their silver and emperors lying about their gold. This coin, it's gotta be the stable coin of the sea. You show them how to put a special pattern on the very edge of the coin so nobody can clip or shave off the gold without getting caught. It's a physical encryption. Pretty soon, a merchant in the middle of Africa and a banker in Northern Europe both trust this coin like it's a universal API. But you go even further. Down at the exchange, you show the merchants how to trade on credit. They start using these bills of exchange, basically paper notes, to move wealth across the globe at the speed of a fast horse. They aren't even touching heavy chests of gold anymore. You've turned trade into pure information. The math is simple. The total value in the system must always equal the sum of all assets minus the sum of all liabilities. You're the master of the financial sink, and as you walk through the shouting crowds at the market, the smell of sea salt and ink reminds you that you just hard-coded the capitalist operating system into these very stones. You're sitting by the canal watching the gold flow in and the data flow out. You know, as long as those ledgers stay balanced, this republic is never gonna crash. It's a data-driven superpower, and you're the one who wrote the source code.
Man, the heat coming off those brick ovens, it's enough to warp the air you're breathing. You're standing right in the middle of this high-stakes, frantic move while the big shots in the Council of 10 watch from their gondolas like hawks. See, the sparks from these furnaces already burnt down half the wooden rafters back in the main city. But that's not what the government's really scared of. They're worried about the source code, the secret formula for melting sand, leaking out to the rest of the world. So they're forcing every master glassblower and apprentice onto this tiny patch of mud called Murano. It's the world's first high-security IP lockdown. You're there on the island, and the smell of sulfur and melting sand is so thick you can taste it. The Republic turned this place into a gilded cage. These guys are the system admins of Light, and they're under a permanent NDA. If a master tries to run off to France with the secrets, the state sends a deletion team to find him before he can upload the data to a rival power. You watch a master take a glob of molten liquid, just a mix of pebbles and ash from sea plants, and turn it into something the world's never seen. Before this, glass was always cloudy green and full of bubbles. It was noisy data, but you step in with a chemical hack. You show them how to use manganese as a decolorizing agent to kill those iron impurities. In our 2026 world, we'd call this bumping up the signal-to-noise ratio. The result? Cristallo. It's glass, so clear it looks like you reach into the sky and grabbed a piece of frozen air. You're looking at the birth of the world's first high-definition interface. You explain the formula in plain talk. The clear glass mixture is basically silicon dioxide plus sodium oxide plus calcium oxide, but the killer move is adding manganese dioxide to neutralize the green tint from the iron. Then you show the polishers how to use a tin mercury amalgam on the back of these sheets to make mirrors that don't tarnish. For the first time ever, people are seeing themselves in HD, and it's totally glitching their sense of reality. They've never seen their own faces this clearly. You tell the council that these mirrors and lenses aren't just for vanity. They're the hardware for the future. This stuff is what's going to let humanity see the stars and the cells. You're encapsulating the most advanced material science on one guarded island. Walking the perimeter of Murano, you see the patrol boats circling the docks. You know that glass code is the most valuable digital asset in the vault, while the rest of the world is living in the dark. Peeking through cloudy, low-res windows, Venice is projecting the future through perfect lenses. You're sitting by the lagoon as the furnaces roar behind you, watching the orange glow reflect off 1,000 crystal plates. You just hard-coded the visual UI of the modern world right into the sands of Murano. Its light, its clarity, and it's all under lock and key.
Look, the horizon across the water is turning this nasty, bruised purple color. And trust me, it's not just a storm coming in. A ship is limping into the lagoon from the Black Sea, and its oars are moving in this ragged, broken rhythm that just feels wrong. See the rats in the bilge and the fleas in the grain? They're carrying a system-wide virus that the whole merchant network isn't ready for. The Black Death has officially arrived, and it's starting a total wipeout of human hardware. You're standing on the docks, and the panic is starting to crash the whole social order. People are just dropping in the narrow streets, their bodies failing with those nasty buboes, the red and black lumps that signal a terminal system crash. While the rest of the world is screaming about the end of days or bad air, you sit down with the city's health magistrates and run a biological firewall. You tell them, look, the city is the primary server and every ship coming in is an unverified data packet. If a packet is corrupted, you can't let it touch the core of the city. You kick off the world's first Quarantina protocol. You aren't just guessing at the timing either. You set a timer for 40 days, based on the logic of the incubation window. You show the harbor masters how to divert every single incoming boat to a sandbox, this isolated patch of mud called Lazaretto Vecchio. It's the birth of the isolation hospital. It's a buffer zone where the infected packets are held until the virus either burns itself out or the hardware proves it's clean. You're on that island helping the plague doctors get their gear ready. You show them how to design those creepy bird-like masks with the long beaks. You have them pack the beaks with camphor, dried roses, and lavender. You tell them, this isn't just for the smell. It's a physical air filter to block the rotten data from getting into your lungs. You're teaching them surface sanitization 500 years before anyone even knows what a microbe is. The sanitizer. You show the cleanup crews how to use vinegar and quicklime to sanitize the files. The deletion. You have them scrub the walls of the dead and burn every single rag and blanket. You tell them the virus lives on the hardware, the fabric and the rugs. The storage. You help them organize the mass deletions, the plague pits on the outer islands, just to keep the main market area as clean as possible. It's cold, it's heartless, and it's the ultimate systems optimization move. You explain the logic simply. The survival rate of the city is equal to the speed of isolation divided by the density of the population. While the people on the mainland are crashing by 60%, your firewall keeps the Venetian operating system running. You stand on the edge of the quarantine island, watching the smoke from the sanitized rags rise into the cold sea air. You know you've just hard-coded the world's first public health security protocol into the law. The Republic survives because it treated life like a set of variables that needed to be managed. You've ensured the Venetian signal stays online even when the rest of the world is hitting a global extinction event.
Man, you smell that? It ain't just the salt from the Adriatic anymore. It's something sharper. Something that practically kicks you in the teeth. The heavy, prickly heat of black pepper, the sweet burn of cinnamon, and that earthy weight of nutmeg. You're standing on the docks of the Fondaco dei Tedeschi. Think of this place as the massive, fortress-like warehouse near the Rialto that serves as the server hub for the entire northern half of Europe. In your 2026 sleeper mind, you aren't just looking at cooking ingredients. You're looking at high-value data packets. These spices are the most condensed form of wealth on the planet. And Venice? Venice has the only admin password to the whole supply chain. You see the German merchants, the clients, just hanging around the gates. They aren't allowed to buy anywhere else. They're forced to use a Venetian interface and pay whatever transaction fees the Republic demands. It's a total monopoly, and it's beautiful. You step in with your logistics brain to help the Senate keep this connection throttled. While the rest of the world is busy shouting about crusades, you've helped the Venetians sign service-level agreements, SLAs, with the guys in Cairo and Alexandria. You show the merchants how to organize the Mutta, these state-regulated galley convoys. This isn't just a bunch of ships. It's a scheduled data transfer. You explain the logic of latency reduction by moving in fixed, heavily armed groups at the same time every year. The Republic makes sure the spice signal never gets dropped by pirates or nasty weather. Then you get into the quality control. You're at the scales, watching the Saggiatori, the professional tasters, inspecting a fresh shipment of cloves. You show them how to spot corrupted data, like when someone tries to mix in dust or old wood to cheat the weight. You tell them, look, if the signal is weak, the price crashes. We only deal in 100% lossless luxury. You've basically encrypted the secret routes to the Indian Ocean through a network of spies and local guys on the ground who make sure no other power can hack the route. You explain the value formula in plain talk. The total profit of the voyage is equal to the weight of the spice times the purity of the cargo minus the cost of the escort and the bribe to the local port. You're sitting there on a bale of silk, the air thick with the dust of the east, knowing that as long as Venice holds a gateway, every king in Europe has to pay the Republic just to taste their dinner. You've turned taste into a global power grid, and you're the one holding the master switch. It's a clean, efficient, and totally ruthless system.
You hear that? It's not the steady bang of ship hammers from the shipyard anymore. It's a different rhythm now, a frantic metallic clack 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 of wood hitting parchment. You're tucked away in a cramped, ink-stained workshop near the Sant'Agostino church, and the air is heavy. It smells like boiling linseed oil and lead, and honestly, your hands are probably never going to be clean again. They're stained a deep charcoal black. You're working side by side with a guy named Aldous Manutius, and you've realized something big. Venice isn't just a port for physical goods like pepper and cloves anymore. It's turning into the world's first global data center for the written word. There are more printing presses running in this lagoon right now than in the rest of Italy combined. This is the start of the information economy, and you're the one helping Aldous recompile all that ancient Greek and Roman legacy code. You take one look at those massive clunky books the Germans are printing. They're like old-school mainframe computers. They're too big to move, they're heavy, and they're way too expensive for a regular person. You tell Aldous, look man, we need a mobile version. We need the Octavo. You show the binders how to fold the parchment just right to create small handheld books that a student or a scholar can actually shove in their pocket. Back in 2026, we'd call that a handheld device. But the real sleeper hack? It's the font. You notice those standard blocky letters are space hogs. They take up way too much storage on the page. So you help the engraver Griffo design a new slanted script that looks more like human handwriting. You call it italic. You explain the whole data compression logic to them. The information density of the page is equal to the total number of words divided by the surface area of the paper. By slanting those letters, you're fitting more words per megabyte, making the books cheaper to produce and a whole lot easier to read. You're basically optimizing the user interface for the Renaissance brain. And you don't stop at the hardware. You go straight to the government and show the Senate how to issue privileges. These are the world's first copyright laws, designed to protect Aldous' source code, so printers in other cities can't just pirate his work. Venice is now the cloud server of the 1400s. Every lost manuscript from the falling empire out east is being uploaded here. You're cleaning up the errors, formatting the data, and broadcasting it to the entire world in affordable high-res portable editions. You sit there by the press as the fresh ink dries on a page of Aristotle. The smell of the salt sea mixes with the smell of the future, and you know you've just hard-coded the information age into the stones of the market district. You've made knowledge the Republic's most enduring export. Even if the spice routes fail tomorrow, the Venetian mine sink is gonna keep running for centuries.
Check this out. The shadows in the palace? They aren't just for show anymore. They feel like a total, hard-coded surveillance net. You're standing in a hallway where the silence is so heavy it practically vibrates in your teeth. You look at the wall and see that marble face with the big, hollow mouth. The lion's mouth. To everyone else, it's just a piece of art. To you, it's an anonymous data input terminal. Anyone in the city can just drop a slip of paper in there to report a glitch in the system. Maybe someone's dodging taxes or a neighbor's acting like a spy. You're working in the secret archives of the Council of 10 now. These guys are the kernel of the state, and they're way above the law. You're using your 2026 brain to help these admins process all that incoming noise. You see them sorting through hundreds of these secret tips. You show them how to filter the junk. You tell the council, look, if you chase down every petty grudge and piece of spam, the system's going to eat itself. You need a validator. You show them how to run a check. The reliability of a tip is basically the number of independent witnesses divided by the total number of reports on that same guy. You help them set up a network of neighborhood informants, the neighborhood bosses, who act like system sensors. They report the vitals of the people back to the sender. It's all about information asymmetry. The state knows everything about the users, but the users don't know a thing about the admins. Then you get into the hardware of the prison system. You're in the leads, the high-security cells right under the palace roof. You show the jailers how to use the thermal stress of that lead roofing. In the summer, those sheets soak up the heat and turn the cells into an oven. It's a way to break a system hacker without ever touching them. You even help the state's secret inquisitors build a deep state firewall. Their meetings are so secret that even the main leader of the city doesn't know the full source code of their decisions. You show them how to use coded messages for their agents, the Bravi, the guys who go out and delete enemies of the state across Europe without leaving a single trace log behind. You're sitting in the council chamber, surrounded by those dark, heavy paintings, and you realize you've turned this city into a self-correcting machine. They don't need a massive army. They just need to control the flow of information. You made sure no single process, no citizen, gets more power than the state allows. You're the one who synced the shadows, hard-coding dominance into the very bones of the Republic.
Look, the smell in the air is shifting. It's not just salt and tar anymore. It's the heavy, sweet scent of fancy perfumes, powdered wigs, and the sharp tang of spilled wine. It's the 1700s, and the old Venetian system is hitting a massive hardware failure. Those spice routes? They've been totally hacked. The Dutch and the Portuguese found the direct link around Africa, and now the Mediterranean bandwidth is basically zero. But Venice isn't ready to shut down. It's just pivoting from a trade economy to the world's first experience economy. You're standing in the middle of a carnival in the big square and it's electric. Those white, expressionless masks everyone's wearing, the ones that hide your face? That's not just for a party. That's anonymity software. You tell the city planners that they've built a sandbox, where the European elite can come to do all the stuff they'd never dare to do on their home servers back in London or Paris. Gambling, secret meetings, total excess. It's the birth of the world's first tourism API. Then you find yourself with Vivaldi. You look at his music and realize you're looking at acoustic data processing. You help him optimize the soundstage for his orchestra, telling him to tuck the musicians behind screens in the high galleries. It creates this early version of surround sound that makes the audience feel like they're syncing with the divine. You even help him monetize the view. You're at the first government-run casino, and you show the guys how to manage the house edge. You tell them the math is simple. The house edge is basically the difference between the true mathematical odds of an event and the odds the house actually pays out, spread across every single bet. The system always wins, right? If you can't sell pepper, sell the scenery. You get painters like Canaletto to create high-res snapshots that wealthy tourists can buy and take home. You're turning the city's legacy code into a visual commodity. Venice isn't a superpower anymore. It's an eternal theme park. It's a virtual reality that people will keep visiting long after the last galley has rotted away. You've turned a geopolitical crash into an immortal cultural sync, making sure the Venetian brand stays online forever. You're sitting at a cafe watching the massed crowds move in that slow, hypnotic rhythm, knowing you've just hard-coded the service economy into the stones of the city. Man, the silence in that great council chamber is enough to crush the marble floors. It's 1797, and the air just smells like old incense and that cold, damp rot you get when a system has finally run out of memory. The Serenissima operating system is facing a total wipeout. You're standing in the shadows behind the leader, and his hands are shaking like a leaf. He's looking at a force-quit command on his desk, a letter from a young, hungry general named Napoleon. In your sleeper mind, Napoleon isn't just a conqueror. He's a brand new OS that's totally incompatible with the old Venetian code. He's fast, he's aggressive, and he doesn't care about merchant protocols. He's brought the malware of revolution right to the edge of the lagoon. For the first time in over 1100 years, the water isn't a strong enough firewall. You look at the thousands of noblemen in the room, the legacy users who've run this show for centuries. They're arguing about honor and tradition, but you tell the leader, look, the hardware is broken. If you fight the whole city, the data gets deleted. You need to initiate an orderly shutdown. So the council votes to dissolve the republic. It's like deleting the root directory of a 1,000-year-old machine. It's a heartbreaking sight. They burn the Golden Book, the state's identity database. Then Napoleon's soldiers get to the big gold-plated state barge. They don't see a masterpiece. They just see raw scrap metal. They strip the gold and burn the wood. It's a total defragmentation of the Venetian soul. You watch the engineers take down those bronze horses from the main cathedral, the same ones you helped swipe from the East centuries ago. It's a circular data loop. What was stolen is being stolen again. Venice is being handed off between rival powers like a shared drive. You're witnessing the end of the world's longest-running independent OS. But even as the flags come down, you show the secret librarians how to hide the code. You help them bury the most sensitive trade algorithms and diplomatic secrets deep in the city's archives. The hardware is being occupied, but the software? It's just going into a deep sleep.
Suddenly, the mist of 1797 starts to blur. The smell changes. Still salty, but now there's a sharp, chemical tang of diesel and a high-tech hum. It's Monday, April 6, 2026. You're standing on a vibrating steel platform out in the sea. The water is churning, but the city behind you is bone dry. You're looking at the big flood barrier, the world's most advanced physical firewall. You're the system's architect now, checking the vitals of a city that's trying to hack the climate. You look at those 78 massive, yellow steel gates resting on the seabed. This isn't just a wall. It's a dynamic response system. You show the engineers how to use AI sensors to predict the high water before it even hits. You explain the physics in plain talk. The total upward force pushing the gate is equal to the density of the water multiplied by the volume of the air inside the gate multiplied by the acceleration of gravity. When the water reaches a critical threshold, the gates are pumped full of air and rise up like a row of shields. It's the ultimate wall for the 21st century. One last task. You head down into the maintenance tunnels. Deep under the seafloor, near the very foundations where those 5th century wood piles are still gripping the clay. You've got a high-density synthetic diamond wafer, a storage unit that can last 10,000 years. You don't write stories. You write source code. You hard code the glass formulas, the assembly line logic of the shipyard, and the double entry accounting rules. You leave a final message in binary DNA. The lagoon was a firewall. The trade was a connection. The city is a ghost that refuses to be deleted. The data is in the salt. The simulation jolts and snaps. You're back in your Manhattan studio. Project complete. You open your eyes to the glow of your laptop. You look at the NYC skyline and realize New York is just the latest version of that Venetian dream. Then you see the news. Underwater inspection discovers non-human technical artifact in the barrier foundations. They're calling it the Lagoon Protocol. The bridge held firm. Sleeper. You didn't just tell a story. You became the ghost in the piling. You made sure the genius of the lagoon would never be wiped from the world's memory. You close your eyes, still tasting the salt, and get ready for the next upload.